The telegram arrived at dawn, and with it, Clara Whitmore's life shattered into 1,000 silent pieces. Her sister had refused the arrangement, refused the wealthy rancher waiting out west, refused the obligation their father had sold her into like cattle at auction. Now, standing in the hallway with her mother's cold eyes upon her, Clara understood the truth with perfect, devastating clarity. She was not chosen. She was convenient, a replacement bride for a man who didn't know her name, boarding a train to a life that was never meant to be hers. But if you stay with me until the end, you'll discover that being chosen second can sometimes mean being chosen right. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. The Whitmore house had been dying for years, though no one spoke of it aloud. It was there in the peeling paint that curled away from the columns like skin after a burn, in the gardens that had gone wild with neglect, in the way her father's study smelled of whiskey before noon. The war had taken their fortune. Pride had kept them from admitting it. By the time Clara turned 22, the house felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum where the living were expected to keep very, very quiet. She had learned quietness early. It was her sister Marianne who commanded attention. Beautiful Marianne with her honey-colored hair and her laugh that could fill a room like music. Marianne, who men wrote poetry about, who wore silk like it was her birthright, who moved through the world as if it owed her admiration. And it did, or so it seemed. Clara was the other daughter, the practical one, the one with muddy brown hair that wouldn't hold a curl, with hands too capable for delicacy, with a mind that preferred ledgers to flirtation. She kept the household accounts when her mother's hands shook too badly. She inventoried the silver before they sold it, piece by piece. She was 22 and unmarried not because she was unwanted, though she suspected that too, but because there was no money for a dowry, no connections left to leverage, and frankly, no one had looked at her twice when Marianne was in the room. She had made peace with it, or told herself she had. The telegram came on a Tuesday. Clara was in the kitchen garden, harvesting what remained of the summer squash, when she heard her mother's voice rise sharp and sudden from inside the house. Not a scream. Rebecca Whitmore would never be so common as to scream, but a sound of profound displeasure, the kind that made the air itself feel thinner. Clara set down her basket and wiped her hands on her apron. Through the kitchen window, she could see her mother in the hallway, standing rigid as a post, her face pale as wax. Marianne stood before her, chin lifted in defiance, beautiful even in fury. "I won't go," Marianne said, her voice carrying clearly through the open window. "You can't make me marry a man I've never met. I don't care what father promised. Your father's promises are the only thing standing between this family and complete ruin." Her mother's voice was ice wrapped in velvet. "You will honor them." "I will not." Marianne's hands were fists at her sides. "Send someone else. Send Clara." The words hit like a physical blow. Clara stood frozen in the garden, dirt under her fingernails, the late summer sun heavy on her shoulders. She couldn't have heard correctly. She must have... "Clara?" Her mother's voice was considering now, the anger shifting into something more dangerous. Calculation. Clara's heart began to pound. She walked slowly to the kitchen door, knowing somehow that everything was about to change, that the careful peace she'd made with her invisible life was about to be shattered. Her mother turned as Clara entered the hallway. Her eyes swept over Clara with a look that was both assessing and dismissive, as if seeing her truly for the first time in years and finding her just barely adequate. "Can you be ready to travel by Friday?" Clara's mouth went dry. "Travel where?" "Wyoming territory." Her mother said it like a foreign word, distasteful on her tongue. "To fulfill your sister's marriage contract." The world tilted slightly. "I don't understand." Marianne laughed, brittle and sharp. "It's simple, Clara. Father arranged for me to marry some rancher out west, Ethan Blackridge. Cattle and land and more money than God, apparently, though God knows what he wants with a wife from Virginia. I've decided I won't go. You will go instead." I can't just... Clara looked between her mother and sister, searching for sanity in this conversation. "You can't just substitute one person for another in a marriage contract. He's expecting Marianne." "He's expecting a Whitmore daughter." Her mother's voice was flat, final. "The contract specifies a union between the Blackridge and Whitmore families." It does not specify which daughter. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. Does he know that you're sending someone else? Her mother's silence was answer enough. This is insane. Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. You're going to send me across the country to marry a stranger who thinks he's getting Marianne, and you're not even going to tell him? You'll tell him when you arrive. Her mother waved a hand as if this were a minor detail. By then it will be too late for him to refuse without considerable social embarrassment. Men of business understand the importance of maintaining agreements. Men of business also understand fraud. Her mother's eyes went hard. You will watch your tone. This family is drowning, Clara. Your father's debts are... She stopped, pressed her lips together. Mr. Blackridge has already sent the first payment, $5,000. That money is spent. We cannot return it. If you don't go, we lose the house within 3 months. Do you understand? Clara understood. She'd kept the books. She knew exactly how bad it was, had known for over a year that they were living on borrowed time and borrowed money. But knowing something in ledgers and numbers was different from standing in a hallway being told you were the price of salvation. Why me? She hated how small her voice sounded. Why not hire someone? Find some other solution. Because you'll do it. Marianne spoke up, her voice almost gentle, which was somehow worse than cruelty. You've always done what needed doing, Clara. You're practical. You won't complain. You'll go out there and keep house for some rancher and you'll be fine. It's not like you had other prospects. The truth of it was a knife between her ribs. Clara looked at her sister, beautiful, vivid Marianne, who had men lining up to court her, who could have chosen from a dozen suitors if they'd had the money for a proper season. Marianne, who was refusing this arrangement, not because the man was cruel or old or poor, but simply because it wasn't what she wanted. And Clara, who had never been what anyone wanted, was being sent in her place. When does the train leave? Clara heard herself ask. Her mother's shoulders relaxed a fraction. Friday morning, 6 o'clock from Richmond. You'll change trains in St. Louis and again in Cheyenne. The journey will take approximately a week. Mr. Blackridge will meet you at the station in Salvation, Wyoming. Everything is already arranged. I see. Clara's voice sounded distant to her own ears, as if someone else was speaking. Then I suppose I should pack. She turned to leave. Clara. Her mother's voice stopped her. This is for the family. You do understand that? Clara didn't turn around. I understand that I'm being sold because Marianne refused to be. That's not... It's exactly that. Clara looked back over her shoulder. But you're right about one thing. I'll do it. Because I'm practical. Because someone has to be. She climbed the stairs to her small room at the back of the house, the room that had been hers since childhood, that overlooked the overgrown gardens and the woods beyond. She closed the door behind her and stood in the center of the faded rug, looking at the narrow bed, the simple dresser, the small bookshelf with its collection of worn volumes that she'd read and reread until the spines cracked. This was her life. This small room, this dying house, this family that saw her as a solution to a problem rather than a person. And in 3 days, she would leave it all behind. She should feel terrified, she thought. She should be angry or heartbroken or something. Instead, she felt oddly numb, as if she were watching this happen to someone else. Clara pulled her trunk from beneath the bed and began to pack. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur. Her mother gave her a small sum for the journey, enough for meals and any necessities, but not enough to run away, Clara noted. Not that she would. She was practical, as Marianne had said. She understood the mathematics of their situation. Her comfort had been weighed against her family's survival and found wanting. She could accept that. She'd been accepting smaller versions of that equation her entire life. Marianne avoided her, which was a mercy. Clara didn't think she could maintain her composure through an emotional goodbye from the sister who had volunteered her for exile. Her father, drunk as usual, seemed barely aware that anything was happening. He nodded vaguely when her mother told him Clara was leaving, mumbled something about duty and honor, and retreated back to his study. On Thursday evening, her mother called her down to the parlor. You'll need to know about Mr. Blackridge, her mother said, settling into her chair with a folder of papers, so you can present yourself appropriately. Clara sat on the edge of the settee, her hands folded in her lap, and listened. Ethan Blackridge was 34 years old. He'd built his ranch from nothing over the past 12 years, starting with a small homestead claim and expanding through what her mother delicately called shrewd business practices. He now owned over 50,000 acres of prime grazing land in the Wyoming Territory. He ran cattle and horses both. He employed over 30 men year-round. He was, by all accounts, one of the wealthiest men in the territory. "Why does a man like that need an arranged marriage?" Clara interrupted. "Surely he could have his pick of local women." Her mother's lips thinned. "The territory is rough, Clara. There are few women of suitable breeding. Mr. Blackridge is building something lasting. He wants a wife from a good family, someone who understands society and can bring culture to his household. He wants a showpiece. He wants a partner appropriate to his station." Her mother's voice was sharp. "Which you will be, if you're sensible. This is an opportunity, Clara. Out there, away from—" She gestured vaguely. "Away from the expectations here. You could have a good life." Clara met her mother's eyes. "As long as I don't mind being obtained under false pretenses." "That's enough." Her mother stood, the papers rustling in her hands. "You leave at dawn. Try to get some sleep." But Clara didn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed and watched the moon track across her window and wondered what kind of man she was traveling toward. Wealthy, yes. Successful, certainly. But was he kind? Was he cruel? Did he want a wife or simply an ornament for his success? And would it matter when she had no choice but to go? The train station at dawn was shrouded in mist that rolled off the river in thick, ghostly waves. Clara stood on the platform with her trunk beside her, wearing her best traveling dress, which was still 3 years out of fashion and had been let out twice at the seams. Her mother had come to see her off, though whether from duty or to ensure she actually left, Clara couldn't say. "You'll write when you arrive," her mother said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "And you'll remember what I told you about proper behavior." "Yes." Her mother's hands twisted together, the first sign of emotion Clara had seen from her since this began. "It's for the best, Clara. You'll see. Once you're settled, once you've had time to—" "It's all right, Mother." Clara was surprised to find she meant it. "I understand." The train whistle blew, sharp and piercing through the fog. Clara picked up her small traveling bag. The porter had already loaded her trunk. There was nothing left but to board. "Clara," her mother's voice was tight. "I do think that is— I hope you'll find Goodbye, Mother." Clara climbed the steps into the passenger car without looking back. She found a seat by the window and settled in, arranging her skirts around her, placing her bag on the seat beside her. Through the glass, she could see her mother standing on the platform, a small, dark figure in the mist. As the train began to move, her mother raised one hand in farewell. Clara didn't wave back. The train gathered speed, pulling away from Richmond, from Virginia, from everything she'd ever known. Clara watched the familiar landscape blur past, the river, the hills, the fields she'd known since childhood. With every mile, her old life receded further behind her. She was heading west to marry a stranger who didn't know she existed. She was terrified and furious and beneath it all, buried so deep she barely recognized it, relieved. For the first time in her life, Clara Whitmore was going somewhere that wasn't the dying house where she'd been invisible. She might be going as a replacement, as a substitute for the daughter they'd actually wanted to send. But she was going. And maybe, just maybe, she could build something from that. The journey took 8 days. 8 days of rattling trains and thin depot coffee and nights spent in cheap boarding houses that smelled of coal smoke and boiled cabbage. 8 days of watching the landscape change from the green hills of Virginia to the flat expanses of the Midwest, to the stark, stunning emptiness of the plains. Clara spent the time reading. She'd brought 3 books with her, carefully selected from her small collection, and watching America unspool outside her window like a promise she wasn't sure she believed in yet. She shared train cars with drummers and families heading west for homesteads, with women in traveling parties and men in suits who tried not to stare at an unaccompanied young woman. She kept to herself mostly, reading or pretending to sleep, not wanting to explain her situation to curious strangers. What would she even say? "I'm traveling west to marry a man who thinks he's getting my sister?" The truth was too complicated and too humiliating. By the time the train pulled into Cheyenne for her final connection, Clara felt scraped hollow by travel and anxiety. She had one more day ahead of her, one more train that would take her to Salvation, Wyoming, and to whatever waited there. She bought a sandwich from a vendor in the Cheyenne station and sat on a bench to eat it, watching the crowd flow around her. The territory was rougher here. She could see it in the way people dressed, in the dust on their boots, in the hard practicality of everything. Virginia felt like another world, soft and dying, and very far away. "First time out west, miss?" Clara looked up to find an older woman settling onto the bench beside her. She wore a practical gray dress and had a face like weathered leather, kind eyes set in a network of wrinkles. "Is it that obvious?" Clara asked. The woman smiled. "You've got that look, like you're not quite sure if you're running towards something or away from it." Clara found herself smiling back despite everything. "Both, perhaps." "Fair enough. I'm Mrs. Chen, heading back to my daughter's place outside Laramie. You?" "Salvation, I'm—" Clara hesitated, then decided on the simplest version of the truth. "I'm getting married." "Well, congratulations." Mrs. Chen's smile widened. "That's a good town, Salvation. Small but growing. You'll do all right there. Your husband a rancher?" "Yes, Ethan Blackridge." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows shot up. "Blackridge? Well now, you're marrying into money, girl. That man's got more land than some eastern states." "So I'm told." "You don't sound too excited about it." Clara looked down at her half-eaten sandwich. "It's a practical arrangement. I'm trying to have practical expectations." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she patted Clara's hand, her palm rough and warm. "Honey, I've lived out here for 30 years. Come west as a mail-order bride myself, if you want the truth. And I'll tell you something, the West doesn't care much about what's practical. It's too big for that, too wild. Things happen out here that wouldn't happen back east. People become things they never expected. You just stay open to it, you hear me?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. The call came for her train. Clara gathered her things and said goodbye to Mrs. Chen, who pressed a small cloth bundle into her hands. "Cookies," she said, "for the journey. And remember what I said, stay open." Clara boarded the train with the cookies in her bag and Mrs. Chen's words echoing in her head. The final leg of the journey took her through country that stole her breath. Mountains rose in the distance like the bones of the earth thrust through its skin. The plains stretched endless under a sky so huge it made her dizzy to look at it. Everything was bigger here, wilder, more vivid. Colors seemed brighter, shadows darker. The air itself tasted different, cleaner, sharper, full of possibility and threat in equal measure. As the train drew closer to Salvation, Clara's anxiety crystallized into something hard and cold in her chest. In a few hours, she would meet Ethan Blackridge. He would be expecting Marianne, beautiful, charming Marianne, and instead he would get Clara. How angry would he be? Would he send her back? Could he, legally? And which outcome did she fear more? The train pulled into Salvation just after 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday that was clear and hot and endless. Clara gathered her belongings with hands that shook slightly, though she willed them steady. She descended onto the platform and looked around. Salvation was smaller than she'd expected. A main street with perhaps 20 buildings, most of them wood frame and dusty, baking under the relentless sun. The train station was little more than a platform and a small depot building. A few people waited, but Clara's eyes went immediately to the man standing apart from the others. He was tall, over 6 feet easily, with broad shoulders and a lean, hard build that spoke of physical labor. He wore dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, a black vest, dusty boots. A hat shaded his face, but she could see a strong jaw, tan skin, dark hair that was a bit too long to be fashionable. As if feeling her gaze, he turned toward her. Clara's breath caught. His eyes were the most startling shade of blue-gray she'd ever seen, pale as winter ice, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. His face was handsome in a rough-hewn way, strong features, a nose that had been broken at least once, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled but might be beautiful if it did. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he began walking toward her. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. the moment where everything would either begin or end. He stopped a few feet away and removed his hat. "Miss Whitmore?" His voice was deep, quiet, with a hint of something Western in the vowels. Clara lifted her chin. "Yes." "Ethan Blackridge." He held out his hand. She took it, felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "Mr. Blackridge." "Your trunk?" "The porter has it." He nodded and moved past her to speak with the porter. To arrange for her trunk to be loaded onto the wagon, Clara could now see waiting in the street, a sturdy ranch wagon with a team of horses. Clara stood on the platform and tried not to shake. He hadn't seemed surprised, hadn't asked where Marianne was. Did he not realize she was the wrong sister? Had no one sent him a photograph? Ethan returned, her trunk loaded, and gestured toward the wagon. "It's a 2-hour drive to the ranch. We should get started while the weather's clear." Clara nodded mutely and let him hand her up onto the wagon seat. He climbed up beside her, took the reins, and clicked to the horses. They pulled away from the station, heading out of the small town and onto a dirt road that stretched toward the horizon. They rode in silence for perhaps 20 minutes before Clara couldn't stand it anymore. "Mr. Blackridge, I need to tell you something." He glanced at her. "All right. I'm not, that is, there's been—" She took a breath, forced herself to meet those pale eyes. "You were expecting Marianne Whitmore, my sister. I'm Clara. The arrangement was for Marianne, but she refused to come, and my family sent me instead without telling you. I understand if you want to send me back. I would, in your position." There. It was said. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes back on the road. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I know." Clara blinked. "You... what?" "I know you're not Marianne. I've known since before you arrived." "I don't understand." He was quiet again, and Clara had the sense he was choosing his words carefully. "Your mother sent a telegram last week, said there had been a change in the arrangement, that you would be coming instead of your sister. She was very concerned that I understand you were equally well-bred, equally suitable." Heat flooded Clara's face. "She didn't ask if you'd accept the substitution?" "No." "And you didn't refuse?" Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "No, Miss Whitmore. I didn't refuse." "Why not?" The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "Let's say I was curious." Clara didn't know what to make of that. She turned to stare out at the landscape rolling past. Endless grassland dotted with cattle, mountains rising purple in the distance, skies stretching forever overhead. "I won't be what you expected," she said quietly. "Good." She looked at him sharply. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but that almost smile was still there. "I don't need expected, Miss Whitmore. I need real." And as the wagon carried them deeper into the vast Wyoming territory, toward a ranch Clara couldn't yet see, and a future she couldn't yet imagine, she found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, Mrs. Chen had been right. The West was too big for practical expectations, and Clara was beginning to think she might be too. The road stretched on for what felt like forever, cutting through grassland that rolled like a golden-green ocean under the relentless sky. Clara had thought Virginia was open country, but this was something else entirely. There were no trees to break the horizon, no gentle hills to soften the landscape, just earth and grass and sky, vast enough to swallow a person whole. Ethan drove with easy competence, his hands relaxed on the reins, his body moving with the rhythm of the wagon. He didn't seem inclined toward conversation, which suited Clara fine. She was still processing what he'd said, that he'd known about the substitution, that he'd accepted it, that he was curious about her. Curious. What did that mean? They crested a long rise, and suddenly the ranch spread before them. Clara's breath caught despite herself. The main house was bigger than she'd expected. 2 stories of solid timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and what looked like the side as well. It wasn't elegant like the houses back in Virginia, but it had a solid, permanent quality that spoke of wealth and intention. This wasn't a homesteader's cabin. This was an estate. Beyond the house, she could see the sprawl of outbuildings, a massive barn painted red, several smaller structures she couldn't identify, corrals that seemed to stretch for acres, all of it neat and well-maintained. In the distance, cattle dotted the grassland like dark confetti, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. "It's enormous," Clara said before she could stop herself. 53,000 acres as of last month, Ethan said. His voice held a note of quiet pride. "Bought another section from the Miller family when they decided to head back east." "How many cattle?" "Close to 8,000 head right now. We'll push them to market in the fall, keep the breeding stock in the yearlings." He glanced at her. "You interested in ranching, Miss Whitmore?" "I'm interested in understanding what I've gotten myself into, Mr. Blackridge." That almost smile again. "Fair enough." He drove the wagon up to the main house and pulled to a stop. Before Clara could move to climb down, he'd already rounded the wagon and was offering his hand. She took it, let him help her down, acutely aware of the strength in his grip and the way he released her immediately once her feet touched the ground. Not lingering, respectful. The front door opened and a woman emerged, perhaps 50, with gray-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun and a face that looked like it rarely suffered fools. She wore a practical dress and an apron, and her sharp dark eyes swept over Clara with an assessment that felt even more thorough than Ethan's had been. "Mrs. Kowalski," Ethan said. "This is Miss Clara Whitmore." "Clara, Mrs. Kowalski runs the household. Anything you need, she's the one to ask." "Miss Whitmore." Mrs. Kowalski's voice was accented, Polish, Clara thought, and brisk. "I have your room ready. Mr. Blackridge said you'd be tired from the journey." "Thank you," Clara said, and meant it. She was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from days of travel and anxiety. "I'll have your trunk brought up," Ethan said. "Mrs. Kowalski will show you around, get you settled. We eat supper at 6. Nothing formal, just come down when you're ready." He touched the brim of his hat to her and strode away toward the barn, leaving Clara standing with Mrs. Kowalski. The housekeeper's expression softened fractionally. "Come, child, let's get you out of the heat." The inside of the house was cooler, thanks to thick walls and windows positioned to catch the cross breeze. Mrs. Kowalski led Clara through a spacious entry hall with polished wood floors and solid, masculine furniture. No delicate things here, no ornate decorations, just well-made pieces built to last. "Mr. Blackridge had the house built 6 years ago," Mrs. Kowalski said as they climbed the stairs. "Brought in timber from the mountains, stone from the quarry 20 miles south. He designed most of it himself." "It's impressive," Clara said honestly. "It's solid, like him." Mrs. Kowalski stopped at a door halfway down the upstairs hallway. "This is your room. There's water in the pitcher, fresh linens, everything you should need. The bathing room is the last door on the left. Indoor plumbing, Mr. Blackridge insisted on it. Supper at 6 in the dining room. First door on the right when you come down the stairs. Any questions?" Clara shook her head, overwhelmed. Mrs. Kowalski's expression gentled further. "You look scared half to death, child. Don't be. Mr. Blackridge is a good man. Difficult sometimes, but good. You could do worse." "I didn't exactly have a choice," Clara said quietly. "None of us do, not really." Mrs. Kowalski patted her arm. "But we make the best of what we're given. Rest now. I'll have someone bring your trunk up." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Clara stood in the center of the room and looked around. It was easily twice the size of her room back home, with a large bed covered in a simple quilt, a wardrobe, a dresser with a mirror, a small writing desk positioned by the window. The window itself looked out over the grassland, offering a view that seemed to stretch to the end of the world. She walked to the window and pressed her palm against the glass, warm from the afternoon sun. This was real. She was here, in Wyoming territory, in the house of a man who had accepted her as a substitute for her sister without question, a man who said he needed real, whatever that meant. Clara caught sight of her reflection in the window glass, travel-worn, dusty, her hair escaping its pins, her dress wrinkled despite her best efforts. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd been sent away because she wasn't the daughter they'd wanted to keep. The thought should have hurt more than it did. Instead, Clara turned from the window and began to unpack. Supper that evening was an exercise in controlled anxiety. Clara dressed in the best gown she'd brought, a simple blue cotton that was at least clean and pressed, and made her way downstairs exactly at 6 o'clock. The dining room was easier to find than she'd expected, though the house was larger than it had seemed from outside. Ethan was already there, standing by the window with a glass of what looked like whiskey. He'd cleaned up from the day's work, his hair still damp, wearing a fresh shirt and different trousers. He turned when she entered. "Miss Whitmore, please, sit." The table was set for two, simple white dishes and plain utensils, but everything quality, Mrs. Kowalski appeared almost immediately with serving dishes, roasted chicken, potatoes, greens from what must be a kitchen garden, fresh bread that filled the room with its scent. "Thank you, Mrs. Kowalski," Ethan said. "Ring if you need anything." The housekeeper withdrew. Ethan served Clara first, then himself, and they began to eat. The silence stretched between them. Not quite comfortable, but not entirely awkward either. Clara was acutely aware of him across the table, the way he moved with deliberate economy, the way his eyes tracked to her occasionally as if checking that she was real. "How was your room?" he asked finally. "Very comfortable, thank you. Much nicer than I expected." "What were you expecting?" Clara cut a piece of chicken, choosing honesty. "I don't know. Something rougher, I suppose. The territory has a certain reputation." "It's rough country," Ethan agreed. "But that doesn't mean we have to live rough. I built this house to last generations. Seemed foolish not to make it comfortable while I was at it." "Generations," Claire repeated. "You're planning quite far ahead." His pale eyes fixed on her. "I always do. That's why the arrangement with your family made sense. I need a wife, someone who can help build something lasting here, someone intelligent enough to understand what I'm trying to do. And you think I'm that person? Based on what?" "Based on the fact that you're here." He set down his fork. "Your sister refused to come. You could have too. Even if your family pressured you, you could have run, could have gotten off the train in St. Louis or Cheyenne and disappeared. Women do it, but you came anyway, knowing you were a substitute, knowing I might reject you. That takes a kind of courage I respect." Clara stared at him. "Or desperation." "Maybe. But I found desperation and courage often look the same. It's what you do with it that matters." She didn't know what to say to that. They finished the meal in silence, punctuated by brief exchanges. Would she like more bread? Yes, thank you. The potatoes were excellent. Mrs. Kowalski was a fine cook. Normal things that felt surreal in their normalcy. When they'd finished, Ethan stood. "I usually spend the evening going over the ranch accounts in my study. You're welcome to join me, or there's a sitting room through that door if you prefer, books on the shelves, help yourself to anything." "I think I'll retire early," Clara said. "The journey was long." He nodded. "Sleep well, Miss Whitmore." She climbed the stairs, feeling his eyes on her back, though when she glanced down from the landing, he'd already disappeared into his study. The next morning, Clara woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of men's voices calling to each other in the distance. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler day dresses and made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee to the kitchen. Mrs. Kowalski was there, rolling out dough for what looked like pie crust. She glanced up when Clara entered. "Good morning. There's coffee on the stove, cups in the cabinet to your left. Mr. Blackridge ate an hour ago and went out to check the south pasture fences." Clara poured herself coffee and wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "What time does he usually eat breakfast?" 5:30. Clara nearly choked on her coffee. "In the morning?" Mrs. Kowalski's lips twitched. "This is a working ranch, Miss Whitmore. The day starts early. But don't worry yourself. Mr. Blackridge doesn't expect you to keep ranch hours. I usually have breakfast ready until 7 for anyone who wants it." "I'd like to keep his schedule," Clara said. The words surprised her even as she said them. "If I'm going to be here, I should understand how things run." Mrs. Kowalski studied her with those sharp eyes. 5:30 is early." "I'm aware." "All right then, I'll expect you in the morning." Claire spent that first full day exploring the house and the immediate grounds, careful not to wander too far or get in anyone's way. The ranch was a hive of activity, men working with horses in the corrals, others riding out to check on cattle, the constant rhythm of work that seemed to pulse through everything. She saw Ethan only at supper that evening, another quiet meal with brief conversation. He asked about her day. She told him about exploring the house. He mentioned the south fence needed more extensive repair than expected. She asked about the cattle breeds he ran. He actually smiled, a real smile that transformed his face, and spent 20 minutes explaining the qualities of Hereford versus Longhorn cattle with an enthusiasm that made him seem younger, less guarded. When he walked her to the stairs after supper, he paused. "Thank you for listening. Most people's eyes glaze over when I start talking about cattle." "I found it interesting," Clara said honestly. "I like understanding how things work." Something flickered in his expression. "Good night, Miss Whitmore." "Good night." The pattern repeated for the next several days. Clara woke early, ate breakfast in the kitchen with Mrs. Kowalski, spent her days reading or helping the housekeeper with small tasks, ate supper with Ethan where they had careful, polite conversations about nothing of substance. It was fine. It was comfortable. It was utterly maddening. Clara had traveled 2,000 miles to be here, and she was living like a guest in a hotel, marking time until what? Until Ethan decided whether to keep her or send her back? Until some unspecified wedding date? They hadn't discussed any of it. On the fifth morning, Clara came down to breakfast at 5:30 as she'd been doing. Mrs. Kowalski raised her eyebrows but said nothing, just poured Clara coffee and set out eggs and toast. Clara ate quickly, then on impulse walked out the back door toward the barn. The morning was cool and clear, the sun just beginning to paint the eastern sky with color. She could hear activity from the barn, the stamp of hooves, low voices, the creak of leather. She walked through the open doors and stopped, letting her eyes adjust to the dimmer light. Several ranch hands were saddling horses. At the far end, she could see Ethan checking his horse's hooves, his movements efficient and practiced. One of the men noticed her and nudged his companion. The conversation died away as they all turned to look at her. Clara lifted her chin. "Good morning." A chorus of ma'am and hat-tipping followed. Ethan straightened and walked toward her. "Miss Whitmore? Something wrong?" "No, I wanted to see how the day begins." His expression was unreadable. "It begins early and dirty. You don't need to be out here." "I know I don't need to be. I wanted to be." They stood in the dusty barn aisle, watched by half a dozen curious ranch hands, and Clara could see him making some kind of decision. "All right," he said finally. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Well enough to keep up?" Clara thought of the gentle trail ride she'd taken back home, the placid horses and sedate pace. "I can learn." Another flicker of something in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or interest. "Sam," he called to one of the hands, "saddle Rosie for Miss Whitmore. The lady's saddle." 20 minutes later, Clara found herself mounted on a sweet-tempered mare, following Ethan and 4 ranch hands out toward the southern pastures. She wasn't dressed for riding, her skirt was all wrong, she had no proper boots. She was going to be bruised and sore by the end of this. But she didn't care. She was out in it, in the vast openness of this territory, under a sky so big it made her dizzy to look up. The morning air smelled of grass and sage and horse, clean and sharp. The land rolled away in every direction, and Clara felt something in her chest expand to fill the space. Ethan rode beside her, occasionally pointing out landmarks, a creek bed, a line of cottonwoods that marked the eastern boundary, a rock formation the hands called cathedral stones. He didn't talk down to her or simplify his explanations. He spoke to her like she could understand, like her understanding mattered. They reached the fence line that needed repair, and Clara watched as the men worked, Ethan among them, replacing posts and restringing wire. It was hard physical labor, and he didn't shy from it, didn't stand aside and merely supervise. His shirt darkened with sweat, his hands gripped wire that had to bite even through gloves. When they stopped to rest and water the horses, one of the younger hands, barely 20, with a sunburned face and shy smile, approached Clara. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but you did real well this morning. Most ladies wouldn't have made it half this far." Clara smiled at him. "Thank you, Mr. Just Billy, ma'am. Billy Cooper." "Thank you, Billy. Though I think Rosie deserves most of the credit." "She's a good horse," Billy agreed. "Boss always picks good horses, and—" He stopped, flushed. "Well, welcome to Black Ridge Ranch, ma'am." He ducked his head and retreated, leaving Clara oddly touched. Ethan appeared at her elbow with a canteen. "Water. You'll dehydrate fast out here if you're not careful." She drank gratefully, handed it back. "Thank you for letting me come. You kept up better than I expected. I'll probably regret it tomorrow when I can't walk." The corner of his mouth lifted. Probably. But you'll do it again anyway, won't you? Clara met his eyes. Yes. Why? Because I didn't come all this way to sit in a parlor and be decorative. If this is going to be my life, I want to understand it. Ethan studied her for a long moment, those pale eyes intent. You're not what I expected either, Clara Whitmore. It was the first time he'd used her first name. The sound of it in his deep voice did something strange to her pulse. Is that good or bad? She asked. I'll let you know. That night at supper, Clara could barely move without wincing. Every muscle in her body screamed protest. Ethan noticed, of course he noticed, and his lips twitched in what might have been sympathy or amusement. Mrs. Kowalski can draw you a hot bath, he offered. That would be wonderful, Clara admitted, and maybe take tomorrow as a rest day. Absolutely not. I'll be ready at 5:30. He set down his fork and looked at her directly. You don't have anything to prove, Clara. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to learn. Why? Because knowledge is the only real power I've ever had. The words came out more honestly than she'd intended. My family sent me here because I was convenient, because I do what I was told. But I don't want to just endure this, Ethan. I want to understand it. I want to choose it as much as I can. His expression shifted, something warming in those cool eyes. All right then, 5:30. But we're taking the wagon tomorrow, checking the northern line. Easier on you. It became their routine. Every morning, Clara rose before dawn, ate breakfast quickly, and joined Ethan for whatever the day's work required. Sometimes it was fence repair, sometimes checking on cattle in far pastures. Once, a full day riding to inspect a water source that was running low. The ranch hands grew used to her presence. They stopped going quiet when she appeared, started including her in their easy banter. Billy Cooper appointed himself her informal teacher, showing her how to read the land, how to tell if cattle were healthy from a distance, how to spot the signs of predators or weather changes. Ethan watched all of this but said little. He continued their suppers, their conversations growing longer and ranging wider. He asked about her life in Virginia and actually listened to the answers. She asked about building the ranch, and he opened up in ways she suspected he rarely did, talking about the early years, the struggles, the gambles that had paid off. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after her arrival, Clara came down to supper to find a book waiting at her place setting. Not a new book. The spine was cracked, the pages worn soft from reading. She picked it up. A history of the Roman Empire, dense and scholarly. I saw you reading the other night, Ethan said from the doorway. That book about the Napoleonic Wars. Thought you might like this one. It's good. Well researched. Clara turned to look at him. You read Roman history? You sound surprised. I am, a little. Most men I've known wouldn't admit to reading anything that wasn't strictly practical. Most men you've known were probably more concerned with appearing educated than actually being educated. He crossed to the table, poured them both wine. I like history, strategy, how civilizations rise and fall, useful for building something meant to last. You think about ranching in terms of Roman history? I think about everything in terms of what worked and what didn't. Romans built an empire that lasted 1,000 years, worth understanding how they did it. Clara sat down slowly, the book still in her hands. May I borrow it? It's yours. I have another copy. They ate supper that night discussing Roman military tactics and whether they applied to managing cattle drives. It was absurd and fascinating, and Clara felt more intellectually engaged than she had in years. After supper, Ethan asked, Would you like to see the accounts? I could use another set of eyes on the fall market projections. Clara's heart stuttered. You want my opinion on the ranch finances? You kept your family's books, didn't you? Your mother mentioned it in one of her letters. Well, yes, but then you understand numbers. Come on. His study was exactly what she would have expected. Solid desk, leather chair, walls lined with books on ranching, animal husbandry, business management, and yes, history. He pulled out a ledger and spread it open, showing her columns of figures. Clara leaned over his shoulder, studying the numbers. She could smell leather and soap, and something that was just him, clean and masculine. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to focus on the ledger. Your projection for the fall market, you're calculating based on last year's prices? And the year before. Why? Prices have been rising. The war created beef shortages that are still working through the system. If the trend continues, you could get 15% more than this estimate. Ethan pulled another ledger from the shelf, one filled with market reports. He compared them with her estimate, his finger tracing down columns. After a long moment, he looked up at her. You're right. I was being conservative. Conservative is smart, but you might also be leaving money on the table. What would you project? They spent the next hour going over the numbers together, Clara suggesting adjustments, Ethan questioning her reasoning, both of them refining the projections until they had something they agreed on. It was partnership, real collaboration, and Clara felt something fierce and bright burning in her chest. When they finally finished, Ethan leaned back in his chair and looked at her. Really looked at her. Not the polite glances of supper conversation, but a direct assessment that made her feel stripped bare. Why did you agree to come here, Clara? The real reason. She could have deflected. Should have, probably. Instead, she met his eyes and told the truth. Because staying meant living the rest of my life as the daughter who wasn't good enough. The one who got the scraps of attention, the hand-me-down dresses, the polite dismissal. I was convenient, practical, forgettable. She paused. At least here, I might be something else. You are something else. The words were quiet but certain, and they hit Clara like a physical touch. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you wake before dawn to learn work you don't have to do. I know you read Roman history and understand market projections. I know you could have refused this marriage, refused to come, but you got on that train anyway. He stood, came around the desk until he was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I know you're the woman who's been eating supper with me every night for 3 weeks, asking intelligent questions and offering honest opinions. That's not nothing, Clara. It's not Marianne either. Thank God for that. The words were fervent. You want the truth? Your mother's telegram didn't just say you were coming instead of your sister. It included a photograph of Marianne. Clara's breath caught. Beautiful woman, Ethan continued, like something out of a painting, and I looked at that photograph and felt absolutely nothing. Then the telegram came through saying you'd be on the train instead, and my first thought was relief. Relief? I don't need beautiful, Clara. I need real. I need someone who can stand beside me and build something, someone who won't wilt the first time things get hard, someone who sees a problem and thinks about solutions instead of complaints. His voice dropped. Someone exactly like you. Clara's heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. Ethan, I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight, but I need you to know you're not a substitute. Not to me. You never were. Before she could respond, he stepped back, putting careful distance between them. It's late. You should get some rest. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She made it to the door before she turned back. The book. Thank you. His smile was soft, genuine. You're welcome. That night, Clara lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Everything she'd believed about this arrangement, about her place here, was shifting under her feet like sand. She wasn't a substitute. She was chosen. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Outside her window, the Wyoming night stretched vast and star-scattered, and for the first time since arriving, Clara let herself imagine a future here that wasn't just endurance but actual happiness. It was a dangerous thing to want, but as she drifted toward sleep, Clara realized she was already past the point of safety. She wanted this. The ranch, the work, the intellectual partnership. She wanted him, and that was going to change everything. The morning everything changed started like any other. Clara woke before dawn, dressed in the split riding skirt Mrs. Kowalski had helped her sew from sturdy canvas, and made her way down to the kitchen where coffee was already brewing. It had been 6 weeks since her arrival, 6 weeks of falling into a rhythm that felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. Ethan was at the table, reviewing a list of supplies they'd need for the fall roundup. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. It had been like this for days now, these moments of awareness that crackled between them like lightning before a storm. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Morning. What's the plan today?" Town, we need to pick up the wire order, and I have a meeting with the bank about expanding the north pasture irrigation. He paused. I'd like you to come with me. Clara's hand stilled on the coffee cup. To town? To the meeting. I want your thoughts on the numbers before I commit to the loan. It was trust, pure and simple. Trust in her judgment, her intelligence, her partnership in building this ranch. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. I'd be honored. Mrs. Kowalski bustled in with breakfast, giving them both a knowing look that Clara pretended not to see. The housekeeper had been making pointed comments lately about wedding dates and whether Clara had thoughts about the parlor furniture arrangement. Clara had been deflecting, not ready to examine too closely what was growing between her and Ethan. They ate quickly and were on the road to salvation by 7, Ethan driving the wagon while Clara sat beside him. The morning was clear and cool, promising heat later. They talked about the irrigation project, about water rights and soil quality, and projected crop yields. Normal conversation that felt intimate in its shared focus. You've transformed that north section in my mind, Ethan said as they neared town. I was thinking small, enough irrigation for the winter feed crops. You made me see it could support rotating pastures, maybe even a vegetable operation we could sell to the mining camps. It's good land. Seems a shame to limit it. See, that's what I mean. He glanced at her, his pale eyes intense. You think bigger than I do sometimes. Push me to see possibilities I'd miss. You do the same for me, Clara said quietly. I spent my whole life thinking small, making myself smaller, convenient enough to keep, forgettable enough to ignore. She looked out at the grassland rolling past. You make me feel like taking up space isn't something I need to apologize for. Ethan's hand moved from the reins to cover hers where it rested on the wagon seat. The contact was brief, almost casual, but it sent heat racing up her arm. Never apologize for that, he said. Not to me, not to anyone. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but Clara's hand tingled where he'd touched it, and she caught him looking at her more than once with an expression that made her breath catch. Salvation was busier than she'd seen it. Saturday meant farmers and ranchers from the surrounding area came in for supplies and socializing. Ethan helped her down from the wagon, and they walked together toward the bank, Clara acutely aware of the eyes tracking them, the whispers that followed. She'd been to town only twice since arriving, both times brief trips for necessities. This was different. This was Ethan Blackridge walking through salvation with a woman at his side, and people noticed. The bank meeting went well. The manager, a nervous man named Perkins, who seemed almost afraid of Ethan, reviewed the loan terms while Clara studied the irrigation survey maps. She asked 3 questions that made Perkins blink and revise his interest calculations, and by the time they left, Ethan had better terms than he'd expected. Thank you, he said as they walked back toward the general store. Perkins was trying to pad those numbers. I caught some of it, but you caught the rest. He underestimated me because I'm a woman. His mistake. Ethan's smile was fierce and approving. Their mistake, every time. They were crossing the street toward Howell's General Store when a voice called out, bright and carrying, Ethan Blackridge, as I live and breathe. Clara felt Ethan go still beside her. She turned to see a woman emerging from the hotel, a woman so beautiful she seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Honey gold hair swept up under a fashionable hat, a traveling suit in deep green that emphasized her tiny waist, skin like porcelain and eyes like sapphires. Clara's stomach dropped to her boots. Marianne. Her sister moved toward them with the graceful confidence of someone who'd never doubted her welcome anywhere. Behind her, a middle-aged woman in servant's dress struggled with luggage, and a well-dressed man who had to be some kind of escort or chaperone followed at a discreet distance. Mr. Blackridge, Marianne said, her voice warm as honey. I'm so pleased to finally meet you. I'm Marianne Whitmore. I believe you were expecting me some weeks ago. Clara felt the ground tilt under her feet. Beside her, Ethan had gone very still, his face expressionless in a way that somehow felt more dangerous than anger. Miss Whitmore. His voice was carefully neutral. This is unexpected. I know, and I must apologize for the confusion. Marianne's smile was radiant. There was a terrible misunderstanding with my family, some miscommunication about the arrangement, but I'm here now to set everything right. She hadn't even looked at Clara yet, hadn't acknowledged her own sister standing 3 feet away. Set things right, Ethan repeated slowly. Yes. Marianne finally turned to Clara, and her expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy if it weren't so clearly performed. Clara, dear, I know Mother asked you to come out here temporarily to hold the arrangement until I could travel. Thank you for doing that. I'm here now so you can go home. The words hit like bullets. Clara couldn't breathe. Her vision narrowed to Marianne's beautiful, lying face. Temporarily. Hold the arrangement. As if the last 6 weeks had been Clara playing pretend, keeping Ethan's interest warm until the real bride arrived. That's not... Clara started, but her voice came out too thin, too weak. I understand this must be difficult, Marianne continued, her tone so kind it made Clara want to scream. But surely you knew this was always temporary. The arrangement was made for me after all. You were just filling in. Just filling in. Like she was a placeholder. A substitute. Exactly what she'd always been. Clara felt something break inside her chest. People were gathering now. The street wasn't crowded, but enough folks had noticed the confrontation to stop and stare. Clara could see Mrs. Howell in the store doorway, Billy Cooper frozen by the livery, the bank manager Perkins peering out his window. They were watching, waiting to see what Ethan Blackridge would do when presented with both Whitmore sisters, the beauty he'd been promised and the practical one he'd settled for. Clara. Ethan's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Look at me. She couldn't. If she looked at him now, she'd shatter completely. Mr. Blackridge, Marianne said smoothly, perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. The hotel has a lovely parlor, and I'm sure Clara would appreciate not having to endure this conversation publicly. There's nothing to discuss. Ethan's voice was flat, hard as iron. The arrangement was fulfilled the day Clara arrived. Marianne's smile faltered slightly. I'm sorry? Clara came in your place with your family's blessing and my acceptance. We have an agreement. It stands. But surely when you see that I'm here now, that the original arrangement can be honored, the original arrangement was broken the moment you refused it. Now there was steel in Ethan's voice, sharp enough to cut. Your family sent Clara as your replacement. I accepted that replacement. Whatever you think you're here to claim, Miss Whitmore, it's not available. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Marianne's beautiful face hardened. You can't be serious. You're choosing her over me? The words hung in the air like poison. Yes, Ethan said simply. The street had gone completely quiet. Clara could feel every eye on them, could feel the weight of this moment pressing down like a physical thing. Marianne laughed, but it was an ugly sound, stripped of charm. You do realize what you're doing. My family has connections throughout Virginia, throughout the South. Refusing me, choosing Clara, people will talk, Mr. Blackridge. They'll question your judgment, your business sense. Some will say you're making a fool's choice. Let them talk. I'm offering you beauty, breeding, social connections that could expand your business interests into markets you can't currently access. I don't need those things. Everyone needs those things. Marianne's composure was cracking, her voice rising. What can she possibly offer you that I can't? She's plain, she has no connections worth mentioning, no dowry, no social graces. She's real. Ethan's voice cut across Marianne's like a blade. She's honest. She works beside me, understands this ranch and this life. She asks intelligent questions and offers smarter solutions. She reads Roman history and debates market projections and rides fence lines in weather that would send most women running for shelter. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less certain. She's exactly what I need. What I choose. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. Marianne stared at Ethan like he'd lost his mind. You're throwing away everything for her? For Clara? I'm not throwing away anything. I'm claiming exactly what I want. Someone in the watching crowd, Clara thought it was Mrs. Howell, made a small sound of approval. Marianne heard it too, and her face flushed with anger and humiliation. You'll regret this, she said, her voice tight. Both of you. My family won't take this insult lightly, and society, people in this territory may not care about breeding now, but they will. You'll be shut out, both of you. Invitations will stop. Business relationships will cool. You think you're choosing partnership? You're choosing isolation. Then we'll be isolated together. Ethan held out his hand to Clara. Let's go. Clara looked at his hand, work roughened, steady, offered without hesitation. Then she looked at her sister, beautiful and furious, and so certain of her own superiority. All her life, Clara had stepped back, had made herself smaller so Marianne could shine, had accepted the scraps and told herself it was enough. She was done stepping back. Clara placed her hand in Ethan's and felt his fingers close around hers, warm and sure. Goodbye, Marianne, she said quietly. They walked away together, Ethan's hand holding hers, the watching crowd parting before them. Clara kept her head high and her spine straight, even though her legs felt like water and her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. They didn't speak until they'd reached the wagon. Ethan helped her up, his movements careful, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. Only when they'd left Salvation behind, when the town had disappeared into the distance and there was nothing but open land around them, did he pull the wagon to a stop. Are you all right? He asked. Clara laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. I don't know. Am I? My sister just appeared out of nowhere to reclaim an arrangement she refused. You publicly chose me over her in front of half the town, and she promised we'd be social pariahs. So, no, I'm not sure all right is the right word. I meant what I said. Which part? All of it. Ethan turned to face her fully. But especially the part about choosing you. That wasn't a performance, Clara. That wasn't me being noble or making the best of a bad situation. I chose you because you're who I want. You barely know me. I know you well enough. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I know you wake before dawn to learn work you don't have to do. I know you're brilliant with numbers and terrible at hiding your expressions when you disagree with something. I know you read late into the night and argue with the authors in the margins of the books. I know you're kind to the ranch hands and patient with Mrs. Kowalski's meddling, and you haven't complained once about anything, even though this life is nothing like what you were raised for. Ethan, I know I'm half in love with you already, and I'm fairly certain I'll be all the way there by winter. The words stole her breath. That's insane, she whispered. It's been 6 weeks. Has it? His smile was soft. Feels longer. Feels like you've been here forever. She was right about the consequences. People will talk. Some will refuse to do business with you. You're choosing social difficulty and potential financial loss for what? A woman who showed up as a replacement? For partnership. For someone who sees me as more than a business opportunity or a path to wealth. For someone who challenges me and matches me and makes me think bigger. His thumb traced her jaw. For you, Clara, I'm choosing you, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Clara closed her eyes against the intensity in his. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be chosen like this. Then we'll figure it out together. When she opened her eyes, he was watching her with an expression so open it made her ache. What if I disappoint you? The words came out small. What if 6 months from now you realize you made a mistake, that you should have taken Marianne up on her offer? Not possible. You can't know that. Yes, I can. His hand slid from her face to tangle with hers. Clara, I've been alone building this ranch for 12 years. I've had opportunities before. Women interested in the wealth, the land, the status. I've never been tempted. Not once. Then you showed up, scared and trying so hard to be brave. And within a week, I couldn't imagine this place without you. That's not love. That's convenience. You want to know when I knew? Ethan's voice was rough now. It was the 3rd morning you came out to ride fence with us. Billy's horse threw a shoe, and you noticed before he did, pointed it out so he wouldn't lame the animal. Such a small thing, but you were paying attention, caring about the details. And I looked at you covered in dust with your hair escaping its pins, and I thought, this is what I've been waiting for. Not beauty, not connections. This, you. Clara felt tears spill over, couldn't stop them. I'm terrified. So am I. His smile was crooked, but I'd rather be terrified with you than comfortable with anyone else. She should say something, should match his honesty with her own, but the words were trapped in her throat, too big and too fragile to release. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, breathing in the scent of him, leather and sage and sunlight. What happens now? she whispered. Now we go home. And then he pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Then we talk about making this permanent. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that felt full rather than empty. Ethan kept one hand on the reins and held Clara's with the other, his thumb moving in slow circles against her palm. Clara watched the landscape roll past and tried to process everything that had happened. Marianne had come. Marianne had tried to reclaim what she'd refused, and Ethan had chosen Clara anyway, publicly and without hesitation. She'd spent her whole life as the second choice, the backup plan, the daughter who was convenient but never quite enough. And now a man who could have anyone, who'd literally been offered her beautiful sister, had looked at both of them and chosen Clara. It should feel like victory. Instead, it felt terrifying, because now she had something to lose. They arrived back at the ranch to find Mrs. Kowalski waiting on the porch, her arms crossed and her expression thunderous. The whole town's talking, she announced before they'd even climbed down from the wagon. Jessup rode out to deliver flour and couldn't wait to tell me that your sister showed up making demands and you put her in her place. She looked at Ethan. This true? Mostly. And you chose our Clara? I did. Mrs. Kowalski's fierce expression softened. She came down the porch steps and took Clara's hands. Good. That other one sounded like trouble from everything your mother's letters said. You're worth 10 of her, child. Mrs. Kowalski, don't you argue with me. Now get inside, both of you. I've got coffee on and you're going to tell me everything. They spent the next hour in the kitchen while Mrs. Kowalski fussed and clucked and made pronouncements about people who didn't know quality when they saw it. Clara found herself relaxing despite everything, the housekeeper's fierce loyalty a balm to her frayed nerves. When Mrs. Kowalski finally shooed them out of the kitchen, Ethan caught Clara's hand. My study. We need to talk properly. Clara's heart kicked against her ribs, but she nodded and followed him. The study felt different now, more intimate than it had during their evenings working on the ranch accounts. Ethan closed the door behind them and leaned against it, studying her with those pale, intense eyes. I need to know what you're thinking, he said. All of it. Don't hold back. Clara moved to the window, looked out at the land that had become familiar over the past weeks. I'm thinking that Marianne was right about the consequences. Society will judge you for choosing me. Some people won't understand. I don't care about society. You should. Business relationships matter, Ethan. Reputation matters. If people think you made a poor choice, then they're wrong. He crossed to stand behind her. She could feel the heat of him at her back. Clara, look at me. She turned. The only opinion that matters to me is yours, he said. Do you want this? Not because you feel obligated, not because you don't have other options. Do you want to be here? Want to build this ranch with me? He paused. Want me? It was the most vulnerable she'd ever seen him, this strong man who'd built an empire from nothing, asking her if she wanted him. Clara thought about the past 6 weeks, the early mornings and the hard work and the conversations that had challenged her mind in ways nothing ever had. The way he listened when she spoke, really listened like her words mattered. The way he defended her to Marianne without hesitation, had claimed her publicly when it would have been easier to hedge, to keep his options open. The way he made her feel like she was enough, exactly as she was. Yes, she said, and the word came out steady and sure. I want this. All of it. Something blazed in his eyes. Even knowing what it might cost? Even then. Clara stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. I've spent my whole life trying to be small enough, quiet enough, convenient enough to not be a burden. I'm tired of it, Ethan. I'm tired of making myself less so other people feel more. If choosing to be here, choosing you, cost me social approval. I never had anyway. She took a breath. I'll pay that price. Clara. His hands came up to frame her face, and the tenderness in the gesture made her throat tight. You're sure? Are you? I've never been more sure of anything. Then yes, I'm sure. Ethan kissed her then, his mouth gentle on hers, asking rather than demanding. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, and she kissed him back with everything she'd been holding inside, all the fear and hope and desperate wanting she'd been trying not to feel. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because of the arrangement, not because your family sent you here. Marry me because you want to, because you choose this." Clara's heart was so full it hurt. "Yes. Yes? Yes, Ethan, I'll marry you." His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something almost boyish. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Clara let herself fall into it, into him, into the promise of a future she'd never let herself imagine. When they finally emerged from the study, it was nearly sunset. Mrs. Kowalski took one look at their joined hands and Clara's flushed face and broke into a wide smile. "About time," she announced. "I'll start planning the wedding." That night, Clara lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind too busy for sleep. Everything had changed today. Marianne had come, had tried to reclaim what she'd rejected, and Ethan had chosen Clara anyway, had claimed her publicly, had asked her to marry him, had made her feel chosen in a way she'd never experienced before. It was terrifying and exhilarating and so fragile she was afraid to believe in it fully. But she did believe it. Against all logic and all her careful self-protection, she believed that Ethan Blackridge wanted her, Clara Whitmore, not as a substitute but as herself. And tomorrow, they would begin building a life together. Not the life she'd been sent here for, not the life her family had mapped out, the life they chose together, knowing full well what it would cost. Outside her window, the Wyoming night stretched vast and star-scattered. Clara closed her eyes and let herself imagine the future. Mornings rising early to ride the ranch, evenings discussing business and history, nights in Ethan's arms. A life that was hers, truly hers, and worth every price she'd have to pay. The morning after the proposal, Clara woke to find the entire ranch buzzing with news. By the time she made it downstairs, Mrs. Kowalski had already told half the hands, and Billy Cooper was grinning so wide Clara thought his face might split. "Congratulations, ma'am," he called from the barn as she walked past. "Best news this ranch has had in years." Clara felt her cheeks heat, but she smiled back, warmth spreading through her chest. This was real. She was going to marry Ethan Blackridge, and people were happy about it. She found Ethan in his study, already dressed for the day's work, reviewing what looked like correspondence. He glanced up when she entered, and his expression softened in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Morning," he said, standing. "Sleep well?" "Eventually. My mind wouldn't quiet." "Mine either." He crossed to her, took her hands. "No regrets?" "None." "You?" "Not a single one." He kissed her forehead, gentle and deliberate. "But we need to talk about practicalities." Clara's stomach tightened at his tone. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just honest." He guided her to the chairs by the window, waited until they were both seated. What Marianne said yesterday, about consequences, about society turning cold, she wasn't entirely wrong. "I know." "I don't think you do. Not fully." Ethan's jaw tightened. This territory is growing, changing. More people moving in from the east, bringing their society rules and expectations with them. The Cattlemen's Association, the banking interests, the new territorial legislature, they all care about appearances, about propriety, about who married whom, and why. Clara felt cold despite the morning warmth. "And choosing me over Marianne violates their sense of propriety." "Yes. They'll see it as rejecting quality for convenience, beauty for plainness." He stopped when Clara flinched. "Their words, not mine. Never mine. But it's what they'll say." "So what does that mean, practically?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, his pale eyes troubled. "It means some doors will close. The Hendersons, they're old Virginia money, influential in the territory. They've been cordial with me, talked about business partnerships. They won't be anymore. Mrs. Henderson is particular about breeding and connections." He paused. "There's a group of ranchers' wives who organize the charity events, the social calendar for the territory. You won't be invited to join them. I'm not sure I'd want to join them anyway. Maybe not. But it would have made life easier, given you a place in society here, connections with other women." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "The The Cattlemen's Association has an annual gathering, important for business, for making deals, and securing markets. I'll still be invited, but you won't be welcome at the social events that run alongside it. Some men will use that as a reason to be less willing to negotiate with me. Each word landed like a small stone, building weight. Clara forced herself to stay calm. What else? The bank. Perkins was nervous yesterday, even with you there. He'll be more difficult now, questioning my judgment. Other bankers will too. It might make securing future loans harder, more expensive. Because you married the wrong sister. Because I married outside their expectations. Ethan's voice was firm. This territory is small enough that everyone knows everyone's business. Your sister will make sure her version of events spreads, that she came to honor the arrangement and I rejected her for you. Some will admire that. Most won't understand it. Clara pulled her hands from his and stood, needing to move. She walked to the window and stared out at the land she'd come to love. You're telling me this to give me a chance to change my mind. I'm telling you this so you choose with your eyes open. She heard him stand, felt him approach. I want you to marry me, Clara, more than I've wanted anything in a long time. But I won't lie about the cost. What about you? She turned to face him. What will this cost you beyond difficult bankers and closed doors? Ethan's expression went carefully blank. What do you mean? You've spent 12 years building this ranch, building relationships, establishing yourself in the territory. How much of that are you willing to lose for me? All of it, if I have to. The words were said so simply, so certainly, that Clara felt her breath catch. That's insane, she whispered. Ethan, this ranch is everything to you. No. He crossed to her, gripped her shoulders gently. This ranch is important. You're everything. There's a difference. You can't mean that. We've known each other 6 weeks. I know exactly what I mean. His eyes burned into hers. I built this place to have something lasting, something that would matter. But a ranch is just land and cattle without someone to share it with. I've been alone here long enough to know that success means nothing if you have no one to celebrate it with, no one who understands what it costs to build. But if choosing me damages what you've built, then I'll rebuild. Clara, listen to me. His hand slid from her shoulders to cup her face. I've calculated risk my entire adult life. Weighed profit against loss, security against opportunity. This isn't that. This is the first choice I've made with my heart instead of my head, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I don't want to be the reason you lose things. You won't be. They'll be the reason. Their narrow minds, their obsession with breeding and propriety over substance. His voice gentled. But I need to know you can live with the consequences. I can handle closed doors and difficult business relationships. What I can't handle is you regretting this choice, resenting me for what it costs you. What it costs me? Clara almost laughed. Ethan, I had nothing back in Virginia. A dying house, a family that saw me as convenient, a future of being invisible. If society here doesn't accept me, I'm no worse off than I was before. You'll be more visible here, which means more vulnerable. Back home, you could fade into the background. Here, as my wife, you'll be noticed, judged. Some of that judgment will be cruel. Clara thought of Mary Ann's beautiful, contemptuous face, the way her sister had dismissed her so casually, so publicly. If she could survive that, she could survive the whispers of strangers. I'm stronger than you think, she said quietly. I know exactly how strong you are. That's not what I'm worried about. Ethan's expression was troubled. I'm worried about loneliness. The ranch is isolated, and if the social circle's close to you, you'll have very few people to connect with. Mrs. Kowalski, the Hands, they're good people, but it's not the same as having friends, peers. I don't want you to wake up in 5 years and realize you've traded one kind of invisibility for another. The fear in his voice, fear for her, not of losing her, made Clara's heart ache. Then we'll build our own community, she said. Find people who value substance over society rules. They exist, Ethan. I met some on the train ride out here. Families heading west to start fresh, people tired of Eastern pretensions. We'll find them. And if we don't, then we'll have each other, and this ranch, and work that matters. She stepped closer, close enough to rest her hands on his chest, and feel his heartbeat under her palms. I'm not afraid of hard work or isolation. I'm afraid of regret. I'm afraid of walking away from you because other people think I should, and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Ethan pulled her against him, his arms solid around her. Clara pressed her face to his shoulder and breathed in the scent of him, leather and soap and something essentially him that made her feel safe and terrified in equal measure. "There's something else," he said against her hair. "Your family." Clara went still. "Your mother's already sent 2 telegrams, demanding I send you home, threatening legal action over the breach of contract, claiming I've damaged Marianne's reputation." His voice was careful. "She's angry, Clara. Angry enough that she might cut you off completely. She already has. The moment she put me on that train. This is different. This is permanent. If you marry me, if you choose this, there's no going back to Virginia. No reconciliation. Your mother made it clear. If you proceed with this marriage, you're no longer her daughter." The words should have hurt more than they did. Instead, Clara felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight she hadn't known she was carrying had finally been lifted. "Good," she said. Ethan pulled back to look at her. "Good? I stopped being her daughter a long time ago. I was just too afraid to admit it." Clara met his eyes. "My mother sees me as a tool, something to be used and discarded when more convenient options appear. Marianne sees me the same way. If they want to formalize what's already true, that's their choice." "You're certain?" "Completely." And she was. The ties that had bound her to Virginia, to her family, to the idea of who she was supposed to be, they'd been fraying for years. This just cut them clean. "What about your family? Will they object?" Something flickered across Ethan's face, there and gone too quickly to read. "I don't have family, not anymore." Clara waited, sensing there was more. "My parents died when I was 17, he said finally. "Cholera outbreak. I had a sister, younger. She died too." His voice was flat, carefully emptied of emotion. "I've been alone since then. Built this place from nothing because I had nothing left to lose." "Ethan." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." But his eyes said otherwise. "Point is, there's no one to object, no one to judge your suitability or question the match. Just us. Just us." The words should have felt lonely, but instead they felt like freedom. "Then we agree," Clara said. "We go forward knowing it will be difficult, knowing some people will judge us, knowing we might lose business opportunities and social standing. We choose it anyway." "We choose each other anyway," Ethan corrected. "Yes." He kissed her then, and it tasted like promise and risk in equal measure. They were still standing wrapped in each other when Mrs. Kowalski knocked sharply on the study door. "Mr. Blackridge, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." Ethan sighed and released Clara. "Who?" "Charles Hartford, from the Cattlemen's Association." Ethan and Clara exchanged glances. Hartford was one of the most influential ranchers in the territory, a man whose opinion carried significant weight. "Show him in," Ethan said. Mrs. Kowalski disappeared and returned moments later with a man in his mid-50s, distinguished-looking with silver hair and expensive clothes. His eyes swept the study, landing on Clara with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Black Ridge," he said, his voice cultured and cool. "I apologize for arriving unannounced." "Hartford, this is Clara Whitmore. Clara, Charles Hartford runs the Bar H Ranch, about 40 miles north." "Miss Whitmore." Hartford nodded to her, but didn't offer his hand. "I've heard a great deal about you in the past day." "I'm sure you have," Clara said evenly. Hartford turned back to Ethan. "Might we speak privately?" "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Clara." "Very well." Hartford's expression hardened. "I'm here representing several members of the Cattlemen's Association. We're concerned about your recent decisions regarding your marriage arrangement. My personal life isn't the association's concern. Normally, I'd agree. However, when a prominent member makes choices that reflect poorly on all of us, it becomes our concern." Hartford's voice was crisp, businesslike. "You were arranged to marry a woman of quality, of breeding. Instead, you've chosen her sister, a woman with no social standing, no connections, no particular accomplishments we're aware of. It suggests poor judgment. Clara felt Ethan tense beside her, but his voice remained calm. My judgment is my own. Not when it affects the association's reputation. We're trying to establish this territory as civilized, as a place where Eastern standards matter. Your choice undermines that effort. How exactly does my marriage undermine civilization in the territory? Hartford's jaw tightened. Don't be deliberately obtuse, Blackridge. You know how this looks. The beautiful, accomplished sister arrives to honor the arrangement, and you reject her for the plain, unremarkable one. People will think you've lost your faculties, or worse, that you're operating from base motivations rather than practical ones. Base motivations, Ethan repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Explain that. Come now. The woman has been living in your house unchaperoned for weeks. Some are already speculating about whether this marriage is necessary rather than desired. The implication hung in the air like poison. Clara felt her face flush hot with humiliation and rage. Before Ethan could respond, she stepped forward. Mr. Hartford, she said, her voice steady despite the fury coursing through her. I've been living in this house as a guest, properly chaperoned by Mrs. Kowalski, sleeping in my own room, conducting myself with absolute propriety. If you or anyone else chooses to speculate otherwise, that reflects on your character, not mine. Hartford's eyebrows rose. Miss Whitmore, I'm not finished. You've called me plain and unremarkable, suggested I have no accomplishments worth noting. You've made these judgments without ever speaking to me, without knowing anything about me beyond the fact that I'm not the sister Ethan was originally contracted to marry. That tells me everything I need to know about your definition of civilization. Clara, Ethan said quietly, but she could hear the approval in his voice. She ignored him, her attention fixed on Hartford. Ethan Blackridge built this ranch from nothing through hard work and intelligent decision-making. He's proven his judgment over 12 years of success. If he's chosen to marry me, perhaps you should trust that he sees something worthwhile, even if it's not immediately apparent to men whose vision is limited to pedigree and appearance. Hartford's face had gone red. Young woman, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly. You're here to pressure Ethan into making a choice you find more acceptable. To suggest his personal life should be subject to committee approval. To imply that his business standing within your association is contingent on marrying the woman you consider appropriate. Clara's voice hardened. Is that an accurate assessment? The silence that followed was taut as wire. You're making a mistake, Blackridge, Hartford said finally, his eyes still on Clara. Marrying this woman will cost you. The association's goodwill, business partnerships, social standing, all of it. We're prepared to be very clear about our disapproval. Then be clear, Ethan said, and then leave my ranch. Hartford's expression went cold. You're choosing her over the association? I'm choosing my own life over other people's opinions of it. If the association can't respect that, then perhaps I don't need the association. You're serious? Completely. Hartford looked between them, his face tight with anger and something that might have been grudging respect. You'll regret this, both of you. The territory is small, Blackridge. You think you can operate outside of society's good opinion, but you'll find it more difficult than you imagine. Then we'll manage the difficulty. We'll see. Hartford settled his hat back on his head. Good day, Miss Whitmore. Blackridge, I hope you find your independence worth the price. He left, his footsteps sharp on the hardwood floors. They heard the front door close, the sound of a horse being mounted, hoofbeats fading into the distance. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Well, Ethan said, that went about as expected. He called you unremarkable, Clara said, still vibrating with anger. Suggested that we had... She couldn't even finish the sentence. I know. Ethan pulled her against him. And you magnificently put him in his place. I probably made things worse. You made things honest. There's a difference. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I'm proud of you. He's going to tell everyone. The whole association will know you chose me over their approval. Good. Saves me the trouble of explaining it to each of them individually. Clara pulled back to look at him. You're not upset? Upset that you defended yourself and me with intelligence and dignity? Upset that you didn't shrink or apologize or try to make yourself smaller to appease a man who had no business judging you? Ethan's smile was fierce. Clara, I've never been less upset in my life. But the association can go to hell if they think I'll let them dictate my personal life. His expression sobered. This is what I was trying to warn you about. Hartford won't be the last. People will come, will judge, will try to pressure us into choices they find more acceptable. It won't be easy. I know. And you still want this? Clara thought about Hartford's contemptuous assessment, about the doors that would close, about the loneliness Ethan had warned her about. Then she thought about the alternative, returning to Virginia in disgrace, or worse, staying here but allowing other people's opinions to dictate her choices. I want this, she said firmly. I want you. I want to build a life here that's ours, regardless of what anyone else thinks about it. Even knowing it will be harder than it needs to be? Even then. Clara took his face in her hands, made him meet her eyes. Ethan, I've spent my entire life trying to be acceptable to people who would never truly accept me. I'm done with that. If choosing you, choosing us, means being rejected by society. She paused. Then society and I were never a good fit anyway. He kissed her hard, almost desperately, and Clara kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. We should set a date, make this official before anyone else shows up trying to talk sense into me. How soon? How soon can Mrs. Kowalski plan a wedding? As it turned out, Mrs. Kowalski could plan a wedding very quickly when properly motivated. Within an hour of being told to proceed, she'd dispatched riders to town with messages for the minister and instructions for what supplies would be needed. 2 weeks, she announced over lunch. That gives us time to do it properly without dragging things out long enough for more trouble to arrive. 2 weeks, Clara repeated, feeling dizzy. Unless you want longer? Ethan asked. Clara thought about waiting, about giving themselves more time, about all the reasons people said you should have a long engagement. Then she thought about Hartford's visit, about Mary Ann still in Salvation spreading her version of events, about all the people who would try to talk them out of this choice if given enough time. 2 weeks is perfect, she said. The next 13 days passed in a blur. Mrs. Kowalski took over wedding planning with military efficiency, ordering supplies from town, reorganizing the house, planning a menu for the reception. Clara helped where she could, but mostly tried to stay out of the way and not think too hard about everything that was about to change. Ethan continued his ranch work, but made time each evening to sit with Clara, to talk about their future, to make plans for after the wedding. They discussed everything practically, where she'd move her belongings, how they'd manage the household, what role she wanted in the ranch operations. It should have been unromantic, but Clara found something deeply intimate in the careful way they built a shared vision of their life together. On the 5th day, a letter arrived from Virginia. Clara recognized her mother's handwriting, and her hand shook slightly as she opened it. The letter was brief and cold. Rebecca Whitmore formally disowned Clara, stated that the family wanted no further contact, and expressed hope that Clara would live to regret her shameful choices. There was no blessing, no softness, no acknowledgement that Clara was her daughter beyond the legal severance of that relationship. Clara read it twice, waiting to feel something, grief, anger, loss. Instead, she felt only a distant sadness for what had never really existed in the first place. She showed the letter to Ethan that evening. He read it silently, his jaw tight. When he finished, he folded it carefully and handed it back. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's honest, at least. Better than pretending there was something there worth preserving. Still, she's your mother. Biologically, yes. But mothers are supposed to care about their children's happiness, their well-being. She never did. This letter is just making official what was always true. Clara set the letter aside. I'm not losing anything I actually had. Ethan pulled her close, and Clara let herself lean into his strength. You have me, he said quietly, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything. The day before the wedding, Clara woke to find the house transformed. Mrs. Kowalski had enlisted several ranch hands' wives to help with decorations and preparation, and the main room glowed with late autumn flowers and carefully polished wood. It was simple but beautiful, and Clara felt her throat tighten at the care that had gone into it. We take care of our own here, Mrs. Kowalski said when Clara tried to thank her. You're one of us now, child. I've been since the day you showed up and didn't put on airs. That afternoon, Ethan found Clara in the kitchen garden, ostensibly checking on the late vegetables, but really just trying to calm her nerves. Nervous? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Terrified, Clara admitted. Not about marrying you. About everything that comes after. About whether I can really do this. Do what? Be enough. Be what you need. Build something lasting when I've never managed to build anything before. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I show you something?" He led her out past the corrals, past the near pastures, to a rise that overlooked the ranch. From here, Clara could see the full scope of what Ethan had built: the house, the outbuildings, the grazing cattle, the land stretching to the horizon. I started with 160 acres in a tent, Ethan said. No money, no help, nothing but work and stubbornness. There were years I thought I'd fail, thought I'd made a terrible mistake coming out here, but I kept going because I believed in what I was building. I'm not sure how this relates to me. You think you haven't built anything, but that's not true. You built yourself into someone strong enough to leave everything familiar and travel 2,000 miles into the unknown. You built knowledge and skills when no one encouraged you to do it. You built the courage to stand up to Hartford, to your sister, to everyone who's tried to make you smaller. He turned to face her. You've been building yourself your whole life, Clara. You just didn't have the right foundation before. Tears pricked Clara's eyes. And if I fail? If I'm not good enough at this? Then we'll figure it out together. That's what partnership means. He took her hands. Clara, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting you, flawed and stubborn and brilliant and scared. That's enough. That's more than enough. Clara let the tears fall then, and Ethan pulled her close and held her while she cried out weeks of fear and anxiety and desperate hope. When she finally pulled back, his shirt was damp with her tears, but his expression was gentle. Better? He asked. Yes. Sorry, don't apologize. Not for being human. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Are you ready for tomorrow? Claire looked out over the ranch at the vast territory that would be her home, at the life she was choosing with full knowledge of its difficulties. Yes, she said. I'm ready. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite knowing all the costs they'd have to pay, she meant it. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold, the kind of Wyoming autumn day that burned bright blue from horizon to horizon. Clara woke before sunrise, her stomach a knot of nerves and anticipation. Today she would marry Ethan Blackridge. Today she would choose, finally and irrevocably, the life she wanted rather than the one she'd been assigned. Mrs. Kowalski appeared at her door with coffee and a knowing smile. Big day, child. How are you feeling? Like I might be sick, Clara admitted. That's normal. I threw up twice before my wedding. The housekeeper set down the tray and began pulling Clara's best dress from the wardrobe. But you love him, yes? Clara thought about it, really thought about it. Love seemed like such an enormous word for what had grown between them over the past weeks. The partnership, the intellectual connection, the way he made her feel seen and valued. But beneath all of that was something deeper, something that had taken root in her chest and refused to be dislodged. Yes, she said quietly. I love him. Then the rest is just details. Mrs. Kowalski shook out the dress, a simple ivory silk that had been Clara's mother's, one of the few things of value she'd been allowed to bring. It would need alteration, but there hadn't been time. He loves you too, you know. Don't think I haven't seen the way he looks at you. We've only known each other 2 months. Time doesn't matter when it's right. My husband proposed after 3 weeks. We had 42 years together before he passed. Her voice softened. When you know, you know. Clara bathed and dressed with Mrs. Kowalski's help, her hands shaking slightly as she fastened the small pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's. The dress was slightly too large in the bodice, slightly too long in the hem, but Mrs. Kowalski pinned and adjusted until it looked almost right. Beautiful, the housekeeper pronounced. Not fancy, but honest. Suits you. Clara looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was swept up simply, her face bare of anything but nervous color. She looked like herself, not transformed into some bridal vision, Just Clara Whitmore about to become Clara Blackridge. It felt right. The ceremony was set for 10 o'clock in the main room of the house. Clara could hear activity downstairs, voices, the scrape of furniture being moved, the smell of something baking. Mrs. Kowalski had invited the ranch hands and their families, along with the few people from town who'd shown support. It wouldn't be a large gathering, but Clara found she didn't mind. Better a small group of people who genuinely wished them well than a crowd of society members fulfilling obligations. At 9:30, there was a soft knock on her door. "Clara?" Ethan's voice. "Can I come in?" Mrs. Kowalski opened the door before Clara could respond. "Bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, Mr. Blackridge. I just need a moment, please." The housekeeper looked at Clara, who nodded. Mrs. Kowalski sighed but stepped aside, closing the door behind her as she left. Ethan stood in the doorway looking almost nervous himself, dressed in a dark suit Clara had never seen him wear before. He looked different, more formal, more Eastern, but his eyes were the same pale blue-gray that had seen through her from the very first day. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "You look terrified." A ghost of a smile. "Maybe a little. Can I be honest with you?" Clara's stomach clenched. "Of course. I woke up this morning thinking about my parents, about my sister." He moved into the room, came to stand by the window. "They died when I was 17, and I've spent the last 17 years building this ranch, partly because I had nothing else, no one else. It was safe, you know? Cattle and land don't die on you, don't leave you alone. Ethan, let me finish." He turned to face her. "Then you showed up, and suddenly the ranch wasn't enough anymore. Suddenly I wanted more, wanted someone to share it with, wanted to build something that would outlast me, wanted you." He paused. "And that's terrifying, because it means I have something to lose again." Clara crossed to him, took his hands. "I'm scared too. Scared I'll disappoint you, scared I'm not enough, scared that tomorrow or next month or next year you'll wake up and realize you made a mistake. That won't happen. You can't know that." "Yes, I can." His hands tightened on hers. "Clara, I've made a lot of decisions in my life, some good, some bad. But choosing you is the first decision I've made that feels absolutely, unquestionably right. Not practical right, not business right, soul right." Clara felt tears threaten. "Don't make me cry before the ceremony. Then I'll save the rest for after." He lifted her hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "But I needed you to know. Whatever happens after today, whatever difficulties come, I'm choosing you every day for the rest of my life. Even when it's hard?" "Especially then." A knock on the door interrupted them. Mrs. Kowalski's voice called, "It's time!" Ethan squeezed Clara's hands once more and left. Clara took a deep breath, checked her reflection one final time, and followed Mrs. Kowalski downstairs. The main room had been transformed. Simple autumn flowers lined the makeshift aisle, and sunlight streamed through the windows, making everything glow. There weren't many people, maybe 20 in total, but they were all people who'd shown Clara kindness. Billy Cooper stood grinning near the front. Several ranch hands and their wives smiled encouragingly. Even the banker Perkins was there, looking uncomfortable but present. And at the front, beside the minister, stood Ethan. His expression when he saw her was worth every fear, every doubt, every moment of anxiety. He looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Clara walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no family to witness this moment. But she didn't feel alone. She felt like she was walking toward her future, toward a partnership built on honesty and mutual respect, and something deeper than she had words for. When she reached Ethan, he held out his hand and she took it. The minister began the ceremony. Clara heard the words as if from a distance, the traditional vows about loving and honoring, about commitment and partnership. When it came time for them to speak, Ethan went first. "I, Ethan Blackridge, take you, Clara Whitmore, to be my wife. I promise to value your mind as much as your heart, to challenge you when you need challenging and support you always. I promise to see you, truly see you every day for the rest of our lives. I choose you, Clara, not as a substitute, not as convenient as yourself exactly as you are." Clara's throat was so tight she could barely speak. When the minister prompted her, she forced the words out. I, Clara Whitmore, take you, Ethan Blackridge, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you in building our life together, to be honest even when it's difficult, to choose courage over comfort. I promise to see you too, not just the successful rancher, but the man who reads history books and worries about doing right by people. I choose you, Ethan. I choose this life. I choose us. The rings were simple gold bands, nothing fancy. When Ethan slid one onto her finger, his hand was steady. When Clara did the same for him, hers shook slightly, but she managed. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister said. You may kiss the bride. Ethan cupped Clara's face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her forget they had an audience. It was a promise, that kiss. A beginning. When they broke apart, the small gathering erupted in applause. Billy Cooper let out a whoop that made several people laugh. Mrs. Kowalski was crying openly. They were married. The reception was simple but joyful. Mrs. Kowalski had outdone herself with the food, and someone had brought a fiddle. There was music and dancing and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in years, held secure in the circle of Ethan's arm as ranch hands told embarrassing stories about him and their wives offered Clara advice on managing stubborn rancher husbands. As the afternoon wore into evening, Billy Cooper approached them shyly. Begging your pardon, boss, Mrs. Blackridge, but some of us wanted to give you something. He gestured and several of the hands came forward carrying a piece of furniture Clara had never seen before, a beautiful carved chest made of dark wood, clearly handcrafted. We all pitched in, Billy explained. Figured you'd need somewhere to keep things, build up memories. It's cedar, so it'll last. We carved the ranch brand on the front, and, well, we hope you like it. Clara felt tears sting her eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. It's beautiful. Thank you, all of you. You're one of us now, ma'am, one of the older hands said gruffly. We take care of our own. As the sun began to set, casting long golden light across the land, the guests began to depart. Mrs. Kowalski shooed the last lingerers out with promises that everything would be cleaned up in the morning, that the newlyweds needed privacy. Finally, Clara and Ethan were alone in the house that was now truly theirs. Ethan took her hand. Come with me. He led her upstairs, but instead of going to either of their former rooms, he guided her to the master bedroom at the end of the hall, a room Clara had never entered, had assumed was his private space. I had Mrs. Kowalski prepare it for us, he said, opening the door. The room was bigger than Clara's had been, with windows that looked out over the ranch in 3 directions. The furniture was solid and masculine, but there were new touches. A delicate chair by the window that was clearly meant for her, a bookshelf with both his books and the ones she'd brought from Virginia, small things that said this space was meant to be shared. It's perfect, Clara said. Ethan closed the door and pulled her into his arms. Nervous? A little. You? Terrified. I've never done this before. Clara pulled back to look at him. Never? Never wanted to. Never trusted anyone enough. His hands framed her face. Only you. They came together slowly, carefully, learning each other in the lamplight. Ethan was gentle and patient, and Clara felt safe enough to be uncertain, to ask questions, to admit when something felt good or strange or overwhelming. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments and nervous laughter and adjustments. But it was honest, real. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Ethan's arm around her and her head on his chest, Clara felt something settle inside her. This was right. This was where she belonged. I love you, she said into the darkness. I should have said it earlier, but I was scared. I know. I love you too. She could hear the smile in his voice, though I figured that was obvious. Say it anyway. I love you, Clara Blackridge. I loved you when you showed up travel-worn and terrified. I loved you when you insisted on riding fence lines in weather that would have sent most people running. I loved you when you stood up to Hartford and your sister and everyone who tried to make you smaller than you are. He pressed a kiss to her hair. I love you now, and I'll love you tomorrow and every day after that. Clara closed her eyes and let herself believe it. The first month of marriage was an adjustment. Clara moved her belongings into the master bedroom, learning to share space with another person, learning the rhythm of married life. There were awkward moments, arguments over small things, misunderstandings that had to be worked through, but there was also joy. The simple pleasure of waking up beside Ethan every morning, the satisfaction of working together on ranch business, the quiet evenings reading together or talking about their days, and there were difficulties, just as Ethan had warned. 2 weeks after the wedding, the invitation to the Cattlemen's Association annual gathering arrived. It was addressed only to Ethan. Clara's name was conspicuously absent from the social events listed. "You should go," Clara said when Ethan showed her the letter. "It's important for business. Not without you. Ethan, be practical. You need these connections. What I need is to build a life I can respect, with a partner I can respect myself for choosing." He crumpled the invitation. "If they can't accept you, they can't have me. That's going to cost you. So you keep saying, 'I'm willing to pay it.'" He wrote a polite refusal and sent it back. 3 days later, a letter arrived from the association formally noting his absence from official functions and suggesting it might impact future business considerations. Clara watched Ethan read it and felt guilt gnaw at her. "This is my fault." "No, it's their fault for valuing superficial things over substance." He set the letter aside. "We'll find other markets, other partnerships. The association isn't the only way forward." And somehow, he was right. Over the next months, Ethan cultivated relationships with smaller ranchers who'd felt excluded by the association's old guard. He found markets in mining camps and railroad towns that the traditional cattlemen had overlooked. He built partnerships based on fair dealing and quality rather than social connections. It was harder than it would have been with association support. Some deals fell through, some opportunities closed before they could be seized. But the ranch survived, even prospered. Clara, meanwhile, found her own place in this new life. She took over the ranch bookkeeping completely, implementing systems that helped Ethan track profitability more accurately. She started a small operation raising chickens and selling eggs to mining camps, using the profits to buy books for a lending library she made available to ranch families. She taught herself basic veterinary skills from books Ethan ordered, becoming competent enough to handle minor injuries and illnesses in the stock. She also discovered she wasn't as isolated as she'd feared. While the Society Wives in Salvation remained coolly distant, Clara found friends among the ranchers' wives and the women in the mining camps. Women who valued practical skills over pedigree, who cared more about whether you could be counted on than who your family was. 6 months after the wedding, Clara was in the kitchen garden when she heard the sound of an approaching wagon. She straightened, shading her eyes against the spring sun, and felt her stomach drop. Marianne. Her sister descended from the wagon with her usual grace, though Clara noticed her traveling dress was slightly less fashionable than before, her face a touch harder. "Clara," Marianne said, "I need to speak with you." Clara set down her gardening tools slowly. "What are you doing here?" "May I come inside?" "This isn't a conversation for the yard." Against her better judgment, Clara led Marianne into the house. Mrs. Kowalski appeared in the hallway, took one look at their guest, and her expression went flinty. "I'll bring tea," she said, her tone making clear what she thought of unexpected visitors. In the parlor, Marianne sat with careful grace, while Clara remained standing. "You've done well for yourself," Marianne said, looking around the room. "Better than I expected." "What do you want, Marianne?" Her sister's composure cracked slightly. "Mother has cut me off completely. She's furious that the arrangement fell through. She's blaming me for the family's continued financial difficulties." "I see. And you're here because?" "Because I need help." The words clearly cost Marianne something to say. "I have no money, no prospects. The men who courted me before won't now. Word has spread about what happened here, about me being refused. They think I'm damaged goods." Clara felt a cold sort of satisfaction. "So, you want money?" "I want you to convince Ethan to give me a settlement of some kind, compensation for the inconvenience caused." "Inconvenience?" Clara's voice was flat. "You refused the arrangement. You came here to try to reclaim it after I'd already fulfilled it. You attempted to humiliate both of us publicly, and now you want compensation? You have everything now." Marianne's voice rose. You took what was meant for me. You rejected what was meant for you. There's a difference. Please, Clara, I'm desperate. I have nowhere else to go. For a moment, Clara felt something almost like pity. Marianne had been raised to believe her beauty and charm were enough, that she deserved the best simply for existing. Now she was learning the world didn't work that way. I'm sorry you're in a difficult position, Clara said carefully, but I won't ask Ethan to give you money. You made your choices. These are the consequences. You're really going to turn away your own sister? You turned away from me years before I came west. You volunteered me for this arrangement without a second thought because I was convenient and you didn't want to go. You showed up here ready to send me home like I was just keeping your seat warm. Clara's voice hardened. You're not my sister, Marianne. Not in any way that matters. You're a woman who shares my blood and treated me like I was disposable. I owe you nothing. Marianne stood abruptly. You'll regret this. When I tell people how you've treated me, tell them whatever you like. The people whose opinions I value already know the truth. Marianne stared at her for a long moment, and Clara saw the moment her sister truly understood that begging wouldn't work, that Clara was beyond her manipulation. You've changed, Marianne said finally. Yes, I have. After Marianne left, Clara found Ethan in his study. He looked up when she entered, took one look at her face, and set down his pen. What happened? Clara told him about Marianne's visit, about the request for money. When she finished, Ethan was quiet for a moment. Do you want to help her? He asked. If you do, we can... No. Clara was certain. She made her choices. I'm done feeling responsible for her consequences. Ethan stood and pulled her into his arms. Good. You're too kind for your own good sometimes. Not anymore. Clara pressed her face to his shoulder. I'm learning to save my kindness for people who've earned it. A year after the wedding, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Ethan on a warm summer evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. He was quiet for so long she started to worry. Ethan, say something. I'm going to be a father. His voice was wondering, almost disbelieving. Are you happy? He turned to her, and his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. Clara, I'm terrified and overwhelmed, and happier than I have any right to be. They held each other as the sky turned gold and orange and purple, and Clara felt the future stretching out before them, complicated and difficult and absolutely right. The baby came in early spring, a daughter they named Sarah after Ethan's lost sister. The birth was hard, and there were hours when Clara thought she might not survive it. But Mrs. Kowalski and the midwife from town pulled her through. When Ethan was finally allowed into the room and saw Clara holding their daughter, he broke down completely. Clara had never seen him cry before, but he wept as he held Sarah for the first time. She's perfect, he kept saying. You're both perfect. In the weeks after Sarah's birth, Clara experienced a profound shift. The ranch wives who'd been friendly before became fiercely protective, bringing food and help and advice. The men who worked for Ethan treated Clara with even more respect, as if producing his heir had elevated her status somehow. But the society families remained distant. Clara received no calls from the association wives, no invitations to bring the baby for introduction. It stung, but less than it might have once. She had what mattered, a husband who loved her, a daughter who was healthy, a home that was truly hers, work that fulfilled her, and friends who valued her for herself rather than her pedigree. It was enough. More than enough. Years passed. Sarah grew into a bright, curious child who rode horses almost before she could walk. 2 more children followed, a son named Thomas and another daughter named Hope. The ranch prospered despite the association's continued coolness. Ethan's alternative markets proved stable, and his reputation for fair dealing brought opportunities the old guard never considered. Clara built the lending library into something substantial, collecting donations of books from back east and making them available throughout the territory. She became known for her skill with difficult births in cattle, developing techniques she shared freely with other ranchers. She kept the ranch books with such precision that other operations asked her advice. She built a life. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Clara riding to the spot where he'd brought her the day before their wedding. They sat on the rise overlooking the ranch, watching their children play in the distance under Mrs. Kowalski's watchful eye. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Choosing this life? Choosing me?" Clara looked out over the land they'd built together. The ranch had grown. More cattle, more land, more buildings. But more than that, it had grown into something that felt permanent, rooted, lasting. "Never," she said. "Do you?" "Not for a second." He took her hand. "Though I admit I'm curious what would have happened if Marianne had stayed, if you'd never come." "You would have sent her back within a month." "Probably. She would have hated it here." "I hated it here at first too," Clara admitted. "Not the ranch, the uncertainty. Not knowing if I was truly chosen or just accepted because sending me back would be inconvenient. And now? Now I know the difference between being chosen and being settled for. You showed me that. Every day you show me that." Ethan pulled her close. "We should probably get back. Mrs. Kowalski will have supper ready soon." But they sat a while longer, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, watching their children laugh and play on land that would be theirs someday. Clara thought about the woman she'd been when she arrived, scared and resigned, expecting nothing but endurance. She thought about the telegram that had arrived at dawn in Virginia, the train ride west, the moment she'd met Ethan and seen something in his eyes that had looked almost like hope. She'd been sent as a replacement, a substitute for the daughter they'd actually wanted. But somewhere along the way, she'd become something else entirely. A wife, a mother, a partner in building something that would outlast them both. Not chosen second, but chosen right. Years later, when people told the story, and they did tell it, because it became one of those territory legends that got repeated and embellished. Some called it scandal. Others called it romance. The version that circulated through the Cattlemen's Association painted Clara as a schemer who'd stolen her sister's opportunity. The version the ranch families told painted her as a woman of substance who'd been recognized and valued by a man smart enough to see past surface beauty. Clara didn't much care which version people believed. She knew the truth. She'd been sent west in another woman's place, expected to be convenient and forgettable. Instead, she'd found work that mattered, a partnership that challenged and fulfilled her, love that saw her truly and completely. She'd been sent as a replacement. She'd stayed by choice. And in the end, that made all the difference. On a wide-open stretch of land under the endless Wyoming sky, surrounded by the family she'd built and the life she'd chosen, Clara Blackridge was exactly where she belonged. Not because someone sent her there, because she'd decided to stay. And that was the only truth that mattered.